How's it going, everyone? This is Tom with Jailbreak Nation. Today we're going to be taking a look at a relatively in-depth comparison, or at least as close as I can come without having the Nexus in my hand, of the Nexus 4 versus the iPhone 5 versus the Samsung Galaxy S3. This is mainly going to be spec based to show you how the Nexus 4 stacks up against Apple's and Samsung's frontline handsets. First off, we'll start with the dimensions, and the most obvious thing on any smartphone, the screen size. The iPhone 5 has a screen size of 4 inches, whilst the Nexus 4 has a 4.7 inch screen, with the Samsung Galaxy S3 coming in at a slightly bigger 4.8 inch screen. In real world usage, the difference between the two Android devices isn't great, but you'll definitely feel it versus the iPhone 5. The screen size is only half the battle though. What about the resolution? The iPhone 5 has a resolution of 1136 by 640, bringing in a pixel density of 326 pixels per inch, whilst the Nexus touts a 1280 by 768 resolution with a 320 ppi, and the Galaxy S3 brings up the rear with a 1280 by 720 resolution or 306 ppi. These are all pretty evenly matched and you shouldn't notice too big of a difference. The iPhone 5 weighs a grand total of 112 grams, which is really light. The Nexus comes in at 139 grams and the S3 133 grams. The iPhone 5 will feel considerably light here, but we'll have to see whether the build of the Nexus 4 will keep up with it. In terms of processors, the iPhone 5 is using a dual-core A6 processor, clocked at 1.3 GHz. The Nexus has a Qualcomm Snapdragon S4 Pro quad-core processor, acting at 1.5 GHz, and the GS3 is using a quad-core Snapdragon S4 quad-core processor, not Pro processor, but it's clocked at 1.4 GHz, and the iPhone's using 1 GB of RAM, whilst both the Nexus and the S3 are using 2 GB. This basically means that whilst the iPhone 5 supports a buttery smooth experience, both the Nexus and the S3 are more powerful on paper. Now for battery life. The iPhone has a 1440 mAh battery, and both the Nexus and the S3 contain 2100 mAh batteries. This in theory should mean that both the Android devices will have a better battery life, but in actual usage their screens are bigger, and various other outside factors may cause this not to be true. This may or may not be a deal breaker for you, but both Android devices come NFC compatible, whilst Apple resolutely remains an NFC free zone. Now let's talk about software. The iPhone is running iOS 6, which may or may not be for you, whilst the S3 is running TouchWiz on Android 4.0, with an update to Jelly Bean on the horizon. But the main advantage of buying a Nexus device, and I'm sure you know that, is the speedy updates and fresh Android, because the Nexus 4 is running Google's latest operating system, Android 4.2, which is a good upgrade to Jelly Bean. The last thing we'll talk about is the cameras. The iPhone has an 8MP f2.4 rear-facing camera, capable of shooting 1080p video, and a 720p front-facing camera of 1.2MP. The S3 has an 8MP f2.6 rear-facing camera, capable of 1080p video, and a 1.3MP front-facing camera. The Nexus also touts an 8MP shooter on the back, capable of 1080p video, and a 1.3MP 720p front-facing camera. Whilst these cameras all sound similar, and they definitely do, there'll be small differences between them, but hopefully the Nexus will match the other two phones, as the other two phones are really good. The Nexus 4 is coming into a very crowded marketplace, but it sets itself apart by the baseline model costing just $299. That's ridiculously cheap, and from what I've heard it acts far above that price tag. If you're looking for pure unadulterated Android, this device may be for you, but if you're a huge iOS fan, you know which one to go for.